Hello, everyone. I hope you're having a great Sunday. On this fine Sunday, I thought I would study and do a little video here on Nephi and why I am of the position that if Nephi really lived and was a historical figure, he is a liar and murderer. And I will show you why I believe that and my defense for believing this and my breakdown of the ridiculous story in Nephi's history here. So, we're going to be breaking this down verse by verse. It's going to get a little convoluted here, but for a little bit of context, for those of you who it may have been a minute since you opened up your scriptures, we have Nephi, who's the son of Lehi. Lehi is a prophet of God. In a vision, God tells Lehi, really it's a dream, but he tells Lehi, a vision in a dream, however it says it. He tells Lehi, hey, you got to leave. I'm going to destroy Jerusalem. So Lehi takes his family, they leave. Then God goes, oh, hey, by the way, you need to bring the plates with you that have the scriptures. Now, these scriptures are the brass plates. These contain the writings of Moses, as it is listed here. So it's the Pentateuch, it's the Hebrew Bible, and a couple other scriptures from other prophets. So Lehi goes, shoot, we forgot this. God just told me. Kind of a jerk. We already walked all the way out here. And he sends his sons back, Nephi, Sam, Laman, and Lemuel. They go back. Now, they try to get the plates 3 different times. The third time, they're successful. Nephi is successful the third time. First time, they send, I think it's Lemuel, maybe it's Laman. I forget who it was. But he goes in, just tries to talk to him. Laban tries to kill him. Okay. Second time, they all grab all their treasure from their dad's house, all of his riches, because they were really well off, just like every good Mormon family. And they bring all their treasures to him. And he steals their treasures and tries to kill him again. So the third time here, we have Nephi, who's determined to get these plates because God commanded it, and he's going to go get them. So that's where we pick up here in chapter 4. Now, I'm going to read through it. There's a lot to get through, and when I have something to comment on, I'm just going to say it. We might be jumping around a lot, but please bear with me. I think I have a very convincing argument here. So, chapter 4, Nephi slays Laban at the Lord's command and then secures the plates of brass by stratagem. I like that term. Thank you, Bruce R. McConkie. Fun fact, Bruce R. McConkie wrote the vast majority of all of these headers to the Book of Mormon and the Bible that you so love. They might have been changed since then, but I know that he was the initial author of a lot of these. Zorm chooses to join Lehi's family in the wilderness, about 600 to 592 B.C. Okay, let's jump into it. And it came to pass that I spake unto my brethren, saying, let us go up again unto Jerusalem, and let us be faithful in keeping the commandments of the Lord. For behold, he is mightier than all the earth. Then why not mightier than Laban and his 50? Yea, or even than his tens of thousands. So this is interesting, because in the previous verse here, let me get it. We have Laban. We have a description here of Laban saying, and after the angel departed, Laban and Lemuel again began to murmur, saying, how is it possible that the Lord will deliver Laban into our hands? Behold, he is a mighty man. Oh, I forgot this piece of context. An angel comes back and says, go try again a third time. God's going to deliver Laban into your hands. So Laban and Lemuel are like, hey, he's a mighty man. He can command 50. Yea, even he can slay 50. Then why not us? And here, it says, even then his tens of thousands. So this is going to come up later in some apologetics we're going to look at. But in trying to figure out who Laban is and exactly what kind of person he would be, it's important to note that Nephi thinks that he has command of tens of thousands, which is a lot. But you could argue that it's just 50 if you want. I don't see how. Yea, or even than his tens of thousands. But Nephi is under the presumption that Laban can command tens of thousands. Laman and Lemuel are under the presumption that it's 50. He can command 50, yea, even slay 50. Okay, so now Nephi gives his very first justification for this, other than the angels explicitly telling them God's going to deliver him. Whoa. Therefore let us go up. Let us be strong like unto Moses. For he truly spake unto the waters of the Red Sea, and they divided hither and thither. And our fathers came through out of captivity on dry ground. And the armies of Pharaoh did follow, and were drowned in the waters of the Red Sea. So this is the story of Moses. Now behold, ye know that this is true. Really quick side note. This is why it's so problematic to engage with critical scholarship of the Bible and to like the Book of Mormon presumes that the Bible is univocal, meaning it's all in agreement, and that it's all literally and historically true. It's caked into the narrative of the Book of Mormon. So you have to defend the literalness of the Bible in order to defend the historicity and authenticity of the Book of Mormon. Because Nephi's saying this is a true story when we know that there's no archaeological evidence for this, and the only evidence for any figure named Moses is the name Moses. But that's a different tangent, maybe for a different video. But the Moses in the story is not historically accurate. It would not have happened that way. Okay, continuing on. That was a small tangent. And ye also know that an angel hath spoken unto you. Wherefore can ye doubt? Let us go up. The Lord is able to deliver us even as our fathers, and to destroy Laban even as the Egyptians. Once again, asserting that this is a true story, which once again is a problem. Now when I had spoken these words, they were yet wroth, and did still continue to murmur. Nevertheless, they did follow me up until we came without the walls of Jerusalem. And it was by night, and I caused that they should hide themselves without the walls. And after they had hid themselves, I, Nephi, crept into the city, and went forth towards the house of Laban. I crept in. He's sneaking. He succeeded on his stealth check. And I was led by the classic line, by the way. We all know it. Say it with me. And I was led by the Spirit, not knowing beforehand the things which I should do. Except you do, Nephi. In your own words, this is what you said unto your brothers. You gave them the story of Moses. Notice here, Nephi already has this murderous intent within him. Right here. The Lord is able to deliver us, even as our fathers, and to destroy Laban. He's able to. I would argue Nephi's already got destruction of Laban on his mind right here, and to destroy Laban even as the Egyptians. He could have just left it at, the Lord's able to deliver us even as our fathers. No, he's got to make sure destroy Laban's in there. So he goes in. Nevertheless, I went forth, and as I came near unto the house of Laban, I beheld a man, and he had fallen to the earth before me, for he was drunken with wine. And when I came to him, I found that it was Laban. And I beheld his sword, and I drew it forth. This is another thing. If I'm creeping, I'm trying not to be seen by people. It's interesting that Nephi just walks up to this dude, right? But he was led by the Spirit. Who am I to judge, right? The Spirit told him to walk up to the dude. When I came to him, I found that it was Laban, and I beheld his sword. And I drew it forth from the sheath thereof, and the hilt thereof was of pure gold, and the workmanship thereof was exceedingly fine. And I saw that the blade thereof was of most precious steel. This is where we're going to take our first little divergence here, okay? So, I was interested what the church has to say about who's Laban. Laban, the keeper of brass plates, is how he's listed. In the Book of Mormon, the man who kept the brass plates in Jerusalem at the time of Lehi's family, Laban robbed and tried to kill Nephi and his brothers. The Spirit led Nephi to slay Laban in order to get the plates. That's all we get. But he's the keeper of the brass plates. So I'm like, it's kind of like a pretty lame answer. I want more. So I was poking around on the internet. Here we go. I'm on Reddit. Now, I'm not using this to prove anything. When I was poking around looking into stuff, this caught my attention because this makes a lot of sense to me. These are great questions that we all should consider. Are there any historical records about Laban? So Lehi sent Nephi to kill Laban and get the plates after offering all his money didn't work to get them. Laban, if you remember, was essentially a minor lord or serf of the sultan/king of the city Laban and Nephi and his family resided in. When a public/religious/important official gets his head chopped off by what was essentially a worthless street urchin, I would argue not worthless because it seems like Lehi was freaking loaded. Because Lehi's family had no standing political or religious, I would say that Lehi, from the church's perspective, was religious because he's considered a prophet. But he says that this is evidenced by the lack of respect Laban held towards Lehi. That's an interesting thing that I'll bring up later. Old laws of the land meant that there was a caste society. Had Lehi had standing, Laban would have been obligated through those laws to somehow offer the plates in exchange for something. So if an important figure gets murdered, not only would that be in the city's historical records itself, but Laban's estate would also have records of the murder and of the court proceedings where Nephi was essentially charged and wanted for murder. Important. And as far as I'm aware, those records would affirm at least the genesis of the Book of Mormon, without any type of archaeological or historical recorded evidence that is real and not just slanted to fit. I don't see how this story makes sense. Can I please get some help? And there was a response down here that I think works. It is, if you believe in the narrative... Let me see. If you believe the narrative, the city was sacked and burned not many years later, and all the government employees either killed or taken to Babylon or escaped to Egypt. So it wouldn't be too surprising that there's no record of Laban's death if you believe the narrative. True. But a lot of these questions are going to come back up, not just because where are these records, but how do they apply to the story? So keeping this in mind, this is a great set of questions. Love it when people engage with the text critically. Even if you're a believer or not believer, it's fun to engage with the text and ask questions. Second off here, Laban also comes up as the son of Bethuel, grandson of Nahor, grandnephew of Abraham, brother of Rebekah, and father of Leah and Rachel. There's a different Laban. His branch of the family remained at Haran when Abraham moved into Canaan, the dealings between the two branches. So this is a Genesis Laban. But it's interesting to me, there's also Jacob mentioned here. Jacob lived with him and served with him for 20 years. This is something brought up in the CES letter, but how did Joseph get all these names for the Book of Mormon? We know that he loved studying the Bible, and it's interesting to me that these names, a lot of them come from the Bible, are pulled from the Bible. And we see Laban here with Jacob right there, and they both appear in 1 Nephi. So that was just interesting to me. Now we're going to go off of Reddit, and we're going to go to something a little more believer-friendly here. LatterdaySaintMagazine.com//Who was Laban? Okay, I loved this. This was, I think, offers a great context of the church's position and of Hugh Nibley, one of the church's main apologists. So I know it's long, but we're going to read through this because it complicates things for the narrative and for the church. Okay? So it says, "For behold, Laban hath the records of the Jews, and also a genealogy of my forefathers, and they are engraven upon the plates of brass." The no. In the early chapters of the Book of Mormon, Nephi recounts an episode involving Laban, a Jerusalem official with military authority. So that's probably assumed by the fact that he can command 50, yea, even tens of thousands. Laban listened to petitions and had an archive of records, commanded a unit of 50 men, so this comes from the 50 number, even though Nephi believes it to be 10,000 men, within the walls of Jerusalem, but also had control over a larger military force, the 10,000, and was greedy, short-tempered, and given to drink. Hey, just like Jesus, right? Beginning in the 1950s, short-tempered, he kicks everyone out of the temple. I'm just kidding. I'm not trying to offend anyone. I like Jesus. He's cool. Beginning in the 1950s, Hugh Nibley compared Laban's moral character and behavior to those of similar authority figures in various records from across the ancient Near East. So Hugh Nibley, everyone. We're name-dropping here. He found that by and large, such men were, quote, "a sordid lot of careerists whose authority depended on constant deception and intrigue, seeking before all things to increase their private fortunes," end quote. Not unlike the portrait of Laban himself. Among the men Nibley compared Laban to was Jaush, the leading military official contemporary to Laban at the fortress of Lachish in the southern Judean lowlands. The offices and doings of Laban and Jaush present a complex parallel, indicative of a special military type and calling not found in the Bible, observed Nibley. Recently discovered seals in Arad, Kuntilit, Adrud, and Jerusalem strongly suggest that the title of the office held by men like Laban and Jaush was Sar-Ir, or Sar-Ha'ir. Probably been butchering this pronunciation, meaning commander of the fortress. Based on a suggestion by John W. Welch, Kelly N. Schaefer Bullock, and former student of Welch, has developed the argument that Laban was indeed the commander of the fortress of Jerusalem at the beginning of the 6th century. That is to say, he was the military commander in charge of the fortified town of Jerusalem. Or perhaps, more narrowly, a fortress within Jerusalem. And they have to get this specific, just narrowly a fortress within Jerusalem, because once again, we have historical records of everyone in Jerusalem. You would think that the chief military commander of the grand fortress of Jerusalem would be preserved. And he's not, so they're trying to play it down. Schaefer Bullock reviews several details reported about Laban that appear to be consistent with what is known about the commander of the fortress from historical and archaeological data. Okay, I know this is a lot. Please bear with me. It gets so good. The sword of Laban. One impressive clue is Laban's sword. According to Nephi, the hilt thereof was of pure gold, and the workmanship thereof was exceedingly fine, and the blade thereof was of most precious steel. This was not an ordinary soldier's weapon. Based on the late 7th century BC seal of the commander of the fortress from Jerusalem, it appears that the king bestowed weapons upon his military officers as a symbol of authority. Schaefer Bullock thus proposes that Laban's sword had been ceremonially awarded to him as a symbol of his office as commander of the fortress. The closest parallel to Laban's sword in Israelite archaeology is the Vered Jericho sword, a large sword made of iron hardened into steel. That's a jump in logic. Dated to the late 7th century BC and well preserved. Archaeologists recovered this sword at a fortress outside Jericho and believe it was a ceremonial weapon. That's important too, ceremonial weapon. This sword likely belonged to Laban's counterpart at this contemporary Judean fortress. So, I bring all of this up just to show it's a fun little side thing, but we're learning more about Laban and who he is. Okay, military commander. He has this sword, which I'm going to show you the sword now. Here's the sword that they found, the Vered Jericho. It's a ceremonial sword, and that's important to note it's a ceremonial sword because Nephi then makes all of his swords in the Book of Mormon based off of the ceremonial sword. But ceremonial, important. It wouldn't be like other swords. There would be attention to detail in it. And we're going to look at right here. This is from BYU. This is a study from BYU, a paper from BYU. We're going to look at what the differences are between the Jericho sword and Laban's sword. So the Vered Jericho sword had a bronze handle with a wooden grip and a blade of iron 3 feet long. Now, the apologists want to try and make it seem like it's steel because it underwent a process that turned it into, there's different, grading and degrees of, there's different types of metallurgy, which I think I had something pulled up here. There's a great Reddit post. If you just look this up, this sword, it's actually a great Reddit post by a historian talking about why you could consider it steel if you wanted, but it is iron, and how it's not like the steel today. But anyways, compared to Laban's sword is gold, well-worked, expensive steel. And this says it's 3 feet long. This says it's in a sheath because they need it to be long because it needs to decapitate a human being. So this is the closest thing we get to Laban's sword. And I think that it falls very short of Laban's sword, okay? It's bronze, not gold. Why would a minor serf have a gold sword? And this ceremonial sword is bronze. It's a ceremonial one. I'm sitting here thinking, it doesn't make sense to me that this sword that we have found is less magnificent than this one, and it is a ceremonial sword. And a big problem here with swords is that a lot of people didn't use swords, they would use daggers. And so everyone likes pointing to this sword because, hey, look, it's a sword. But once again, it's just this one ceremonial blade, and this is one of very few that we have, and it doesn't stack up to what we read about here about Laban's sword. So, interesting. Just interesting things to bring up, okay? This is the thing about steel. This is a great thing. I'm not going to read it out, but the John here has a really cool breakdown of why it's called steel and how it was made and how ancient Israel made their blades and could have made steel blades. Really cool. Okay, so I just wanted to bring that up because it talks about it here. Okay. So it says it's the closest counterpart. It's the closest, and yet there's still a large gap for me. And the sword likely belonged to Laban's counterpart at this contemporary Judean fortress. I don't understand this. His counterpart, meaning his wife. Why would his wife have a sword, but then he carries it around? I don't understand any of that. Okay, the treasury of Laban. Another detail indicating that Laban may have been the commander of the fortress in Jerusalem is that he had important records under his care in his treasury. Important archives were kept by the commanders of both the Lachish and the Arad fortresses. At Lachish, these records were copied onto delet, most likely meaning a column of writing on papyrus or possibly bronze writing tablets comparable to plates of brass in Laban's treasury. This is just conjecture. We have never seen a single we've never seen this before. People didn't do this. There's a reason it's most likely on a column of papyrus, because we just don't find ancient societies dedicating large portions of writings onto metal plates. It's just not a thing. And when the very rare times when we do find it, so little can be written on the metal plates. So the idea that we would have the entire Pentateuch, all the Hebrew Bible on metal plates, it would be freaking ginormous. So not likely. Also, we'll get to it, but there's an argument that they speak Reformed Egyptian, and that these plates are in Reformed Egyptian because they're trying to preserve the language of their fathers. Meaning that these scriptures, which were written at the time, some of them recent, like Isaiah, which actually was written after the Book of Mormon, but we can get into that later. But some of these writings were very recent that are supposedly on the plates of Laban, and that means that they would have had to have been translated from Hebrew into Reformed Egyptian, and put onto bronze plates in a very short time period. So all of it strains credulity. Schaefer Bullock, following a suggestion made by Welch, proposes that Laban, as the commander in Jerusalem, specifically had charge over the royal treasury. Interesting that we have no mention of him historically if we're going to make a claim that big. Laban and his 50. Laban and Lemuel feared Laban because he can command 50. Nibley long ago pointed out that 50 is a standard military unit in the ancient Near East. Of particular note is a frequent reference to garrisons of 50 in the Amarna letters. I don't see how garrisons of 50 even fits, because a garrison is a huge amount of people. Nadav Na'am, I guess it's maybe the tens of thousands. Nadav Na'aman, an expert of Amarna documents, explained a cadre of 50 soldiers, or multiples thereof, was a standard unit of Egyptian troops according to the Amarna letters. 50 was also the standard unit for manning a garrison. 50 is also the standard military unit in Neo-Assyrian and Neo-Babylonian. Laban's 50 thus probably represents the garrison directly under him as a commander of the fortress, according to Schaefer Bullock. Okay, so that's what they have to say about that. Once again, showing that he's a military commander. The servants of Laban, in addition to his 50, Nephi mentions the servants of Laban who were sent to slay Nephi and his brothers. As Schaefer Bullock points out, these do not appear to be domestic servants or overseers of commercial affairs, since they follow orders to kill the sons of Lehi. An inscription found at Kuntilit, Adrad, mentions Na'ar Sar'ir. The Hebrew term Na'ar usually refers to an adolescent boy, but in this context, William M. Schneidwin, oh my gosh, they just like to name drop in here, suggests that it is likely refers to a servant or apprentice. Thus, this term in Hebrew would be a young person receiving military training under the direction of the commander of the fortress. Others have argued that in military contexts, a Na'ar was actually an elite warrior and highly trusted advisor or officer under a military commander. Schaefer Bullock proposes that these are the servants of Laban, including Zoram, who is the keeper of the treasury keys, may have been Laban's chief Na'ar, who would follow his orders to execute the sons of Lehi. That's going to be problematic because Nephi can straight up hold and restrain Zoram, and then Zoram just immediately folds his cards. And it's like, yep, you're right, I'm coming with you, Nephi. Doesn't even try and fight him. If he had military, if he was an elite warrior, highly trusted, that means he's loyal if he's highly trusted. The idea that Zoram would fold so quickly also strains credulity, if we're going to go with this narrative. Okay, finally, the final thing here, the why. As Hugh Nibley determined in his groundbreaking study comparing Laban to military officials from the ancient Near East, Laban is seen to be the very type and model of a well-known class of public official in the ancient Near East. Everything about him is authentic, except his sword and the fact that we have no record of him. And as we get down to it, we're going to talk about the story and how he engages with the elders of the church and how that kind of flies in front of the narrative of the restoration of the church, but we'll get there in a second because it's interesting. This conclusion still rings true decades later, as Laban compares favorably to even more recent discoveries about the office of commander of the fortress in ancient Judah. Significantly, one piece of evidence for the title and role of commander of the fortress comes directly from a seal found in Jerusalem in the late 7th century BC. This not only proves that the office existed in the exact time and place where readers are introduced to the powerful military official named Laban, but also could very well be an artifact directly linked to Laban himself, as he or one of his predecessors may very well have used this seal in official affairs. If Laban is understood to be the commander of the fortress at Jerusalem, the courage all the sons of Lehi, but especially Nephi, displayed in approaching him to obtain the plates of brass, comes into greater relief. That Laban could command 50, yea, even he could slay 50, was no hyperbole from Laban and Lemuel. He was a powerful, dangerous man, not to be messed with by ordinary citizens. I would argue Lehi's not, considering how rich he was and that he held the office of prophet. Laban deserves some credit for making an attempt, however feeble, to approach such a man, and all the brothers should be acknowledged for whatever part they played in attempting to bargain with Laban according to Nephi's plan. Most especially, understanding who Laban really was and the power he could wield helps readers better appreciate the courage it took for Nephi to put his trust in the angelic promise that the Lord will deliver Laban into your hands, and then proceed to seek out Laban with the support of his brothers, being led by the Spirit, not knowing beforehand the things which he should do. Okay. Furthermore, if the servants of Laban were themselves elite warriors and high-ranking military personnel, and Zoram was chief among them, then Nephi further displayed his courage and trust in the Lord as he approached Zoram wearing the armor of Laban in order to obtain the plates of brass. So this is another thing. If Zoram is the highest one, most trusted, you think he would know what Laban looks and sounds like. But Zorm in the text from the Book of Mormon says, well, I saw the clothes and I saw the sword, so I assumed that it was Laban, indicating that Zorm and Laban aren't actually tight from the text. But here, they're trying to argue, or Nibley or whoever wrote this article is trying to argue that, oh, Zorm is this high-ranking official, this elite warrior, and somehow he just forgot entirely what Laban looked like and sounded like. If Zorm had not been fooled by the ruse and recognized Nephi, then Nephi's life would have been directly at risk, but he did. That's the thing. Illustrating the seriousness of this conviction when he swore an oath, as the Lord liveth and as we live, we will not go down unto our Father in the wilderness until we have accomplished the thing which the Lord hath commanded of us. Nephi truly was willing to put his life on the line to fulfill what the Lord commanded. Nephi would swear a similar oath to Zorm himself, assuring him his freedom if he joined Lehi's company. Notice that they leave out the fact that Nephi also threatened to kill Zorm. That Nephi should be able to seize upon the servant of Laban and hold him that he should not flee. While doing so is even more impressive, considering Zorm may have been a well-trained warrior. Strands credulity. It emphasizes the fact that however large in stature Nephi may have been, he still needed much strength of the Lord in order to hold Zorm down. It also highlights the faith of Lehi in commissioning his sons to go to Laban as the Lord had commanded, trusting that the Lord will deliver my sons out of the hands of Laban and bring them down again to us in the wilderness. It also deepens our appreciation for Sarah's rejoicing when her sons returned safely. She knew they had been sent to a powerful and tempestuous military leader and understandably feared the worst. I'm reading all this because I want you to understand the full context and what apologists and what the church views this story as. Because I'm gonna present to you pretty much an airtight case that Nephi is a murdering liar. All in all, the range of emotions and behaviors displayed by the whole family, the courage, fear, and failures and triumphs can be better appreciated when Laban himself is better understood. Studying the plausible military positions of Laban and his servant Zorm truly brings life to the gravity of the dangers and risks Nephi and his brothers faced in their adventures in Jerusalem, and also the courage, trust, and faith in the Lord that Nephi showed through his actions. This understanding also better highlights the providential hand of the Lord in safely preserving all four brothers for their return to their father's camp. Whew. That was a lot. Take a deep breath. Back to the narrative. So all of that was pretty much just to give you an idea of who Laban is and to show that they wanted to try and stretch this idea that he was real, and he was real based on what we have here. He's a military leader. He's high up there. His servants are elite warriors, and it just so happens that a couple things about him don't add up, like his sword not actually being historically or archaeologically accurate. Mainly because it says precious steel and gold. And anyways, and it came to pass that I was constrained by the Spirit, that I should kill Laban. Constrained. I think I looked this up before. Constrained definition means appearing forced or overly controlled. Spirit forced me that I should kill Laban. But I said in my heart, because I'm so spiritual and right and moral, never at any time have I shed the blood of man. And I shrunk in wood that I might not slay him. No, we're going to notice here there's so many justifications here. Like, Nephi really wants you to know that he had to kill him, and there was all these justifications for it. The Spirit said unto me again, behold, the Lord hath delivered him into thy hands. Yea. So this is all the Spirit says. Then this is what Nephi thinks. Yea, and I also knew that he had sought to take away mine own life. Yea, and he would not hearken unto the commandments of the Lord, and he had taken away our property. He tried to kill me, and he tried to take my property, and he doesn't obey the commandments. Even though Nephi and Laban don't have a close relationship, this would be a military figure. It's not like they have news like we do, so the idea that you would know Laban in his personal life is ridiculous. You might have hearsay, like, oh, I hear he's a wicked man, but you don't actually know, okay? This is you thinking it. This is not the Spirit telling you any of this. And it came to pass that the Spirit said unto me again, slay him, for the Lord hath delivered him into thy hands. Behold, the Lord slayeth the wicked to bring forth his righteous purposes. It is better that one man should perish than that a nation should dwindle and perish in unbelief. Okay, this is the crux of the argument for me, all right? The Spirit's telling him, slay him. I've delivered him to you. And the reason why, other than you, Nephi, justifying it to yourself by saying, he tried to kill me and steal all my stuff, and he doesn't obey the commandments. But the Spirit's telling you that it's better that one man perish than that a nation should dwindle and perish in unbelief. The problem with that justification is that according to the narrative, Jerusalem perishes anyways. So the idea that the Spirit is insinuating here that, hey, we got to kill him because the nation under him is going to dwindle and perish in unbelief doesn't fit. Also, the idea that it's a whole nation when we know that Laban is a minor serf and he's not over the whole nation. He's underneath the reign of Zedekiah. That's from 1 Nephi 1. Also doesn't make sense, this justification, that a nation should dwindle and perish in unbelief. Now, I had an argument just a couple days ago with my anthropologist friend, and we were talking about this narrative because I told him my views on this story of Nephi, and he told me that this sentence, and I backed him into a corner. When you get backed into a corner, you start changing what this means. What it means is what I just said it means. It's how you would read it. But backed into a corner, right, when you realize that, hey, a nation isn't going to dwindle and perish underneath whether or not Laban dies, and it dwindles and perishes anyways, so this isn't a real justification. My friend told me that this is obviously referring to Nephi and Nephi's posterity. It is better that one man should perish than that a nation, Nephi's nation, should dwindle and perish in unbelief. Insinuating that if he hadn't killed Laban, Laban would have gone and slain Lehi and his family and killed them. So we're going to break down that argument first off, okay? I think this completely knocks the argument out of the park. Dwindle and perish. If Laban comes and just slays and kills you, there's no dwindling. So that obviously cannot refer to the fact that I need to kill Laban because it's referring to Nephi's posterity. Because the term dwindle is, I'm dwindling, I'm slowly losing. In fact, let's look up dwindle. Diminish gradually in size. Right out the gates, that renegotiation of the text is wrong, to assume that this means that it's Nephi and Nephi's posterity. The second thing that I was getting to here is that if you killed Laban, the idea that that's the only thing stopping people pursuing you is ridiculous. If you are what that scriptural magazine and what Hugh Nibley, the main leading apologist of the church, and what the church's narrative wants you to believe, is that Laban is this commander of so many people, but he's still under Zedekiah. But he's got to be one of the chief leaders of one of these fortresses, commanding 50 men under a garrison, and potentially even tens of thousands of men. The idea that if he died, there wouldn't be an investigation behind it, that Zedekiah wouldn't be like, hey, someone investigate why my chief dude just died, or the idea that any of his, his loyal elite warriors, servants, who he's training, the idea that none of them would be like, oh, hey, Nephi and them came twice, and we tried to kill them, and somehow we weren't able to, by the way, even though we're elite warriors, but we tried to kill them 2 times, because they tried to come to us 2 times, and so the idea that they're not going to look into that and be like, hey, suddenly Laban's dead, put 2 and 2 together, or Laban's dead, Zoram's gone, and the plates are gone, and I was there when they were asking for the plates, I know exactly who it is. Like, immediately, all of his servants, everyone underneath him would immediately know. Any investigation would be like that. They would know. And they'd start pursuing them. So the idea that Nephi even had to kill Laban because Laban was going to pursue Nephi is ridiculous, because he's getting pursued anyways. And in the narrative, guess what? He's not pursued, which is a problem, because he absolutely would have been pursued. There's no way he wouldn't have been. The chief military leader. Also, this guy, Laban, we know that he was out by night among the elders of the church, right? That's what it says. So not only is he an elite military leader over a fortress and a garrison of elite warriors who are all faithful and trustworthy to him, but he also has relationships with the elders of the church, and he parties with them. He's out with them. The idea that none of his friends, none of these elders would then turn around and also be concerned about what just happened to Laban. So that, all of that strains credulity. The second thing here is, what I was taught is that the church is a restoration, that the organization of 12 prophets and apostles, of a quorum of 70, that this is how it was in every dispensation. This is important because this is before Jerusalem falls. So we're still in a dispensation here with prophets and apostles. Lehi's a prophet. We have books written at the same time as Lehi that are written by prophets. But this goes to show how the narrative of the church doesn't line up with what prophets actually were in the Old Testament. Prophets in the Old Testament did not belong to a formal organization. Many of them were just random dudes, some of them farmers, like Amos or whatever, that just had visions. And that's what we see in the narrative of the Book of Mormon. Lehi just has a vision and he goes. And he's not well known. As we said, the church's own view on the scripture site said, hey, Laban didn't know him very well, even though Laban knows the elders of the church well. So how is Lehi a prophet, right? So we have to assume that either the current organization of the church is so corrupt that the people who consider themselves the prophets at the time are completely fallen prophets, or we have to assume what we get from the text, which is the religious structure at this time looks nothing like the religious structure that was quote-unquote restored in this day, and prophets absolutely are not, they're not called and ordained in this very systematic order. Rather, they're random individuals who get visions and then are called to preach those visions to people, and they're just chosen directly by God, independent of one another. We also see that in this idea that Lehi can just leave, and no other prophet in that city gets that same message to leave. So this is just not how the Lord has set up his structure, and we see it here not being set up in the same way that it supposedly was. So is Lehi actually a prophet? Because we are having two different definitions of prophets here. One is the prophet we now hold today as what a prophet would be, and then this is an entirely different prophet, which is just someone gets a vision. So I would argue that when Joseph Smith wrote this, he's writing it with the understanding of an Old Testament prophet, which can just be anyone who's called of God, independent of any religious structure. Okay, with that out of the way, and I only bring that up because if Lehi really was a prophet in part of a religious structure, that means that, it means that the elders at the time would have been under Lehi, which means Laban absolutely would have known these are the these are the children of the prophet or whatever, right? Another big thing is that when we trace the authority in the Book of Mormon to baptize and to do certain things, it actually comes back from Nephi and Lehi. But how do we know that they're actually prophets and have received this? Like, when you're a prophet, you can't just say you're a prophet in our church, right? You need authority. Where do they get the authority here? If they're not part of the systematic organization of the church at the time, which they're clearly not in the narrative, where are they getting their authority? Where does it ever say that their authority was brought back unto them? Up until the middle of the narrative, where then there's Abinadi, and then that's also another question. How does Abinadi get his authority? They all want to trace it back here to, well, these guys are prophets. That they're just prophets because they follow the Old Testament prophets, not the idea of a prophet today, which is a prophet who holds all the keys of the restoration, the keys of the priesthood. So very different ideas here, conflicting ideas, I would argue. Continuing on, and now when I, Nephi, had heard these words, I remembered the words of the Lord which spake unto me in the wilderness, saying that inasmuch as thy seed shall keep my commandments, they shall prosper in the land of promise. So now, Nephi is remembering that I got to obey God, otherwise I'm not going to prosper. So he's like, I got to kill him. Yea, and I also thought that they could not keep the commandments of the Lord according to the law of Moses, save they should have the law. This is another thing. If you have Lehi, who already knows the law, you guys can rewrite down the law. You know the law. Like the idea that you guys wouldn't know, like you'd grown up, Lehi's been doing this his whole life. You don't have the law, you can't rewrite it down. We need to go back and confront this military warlord and risk all of our lives and kill him just to get these plates, which are on brass. Like, all of it strains so much credulity when you could just write it down. You could just be like, I'm just going to write it down. I'm just going to rewrite it. I know what the laws are. But, I mean, sure. I want to keep all the stories word for word. I don't want to rewrite them down. Maybe I'll remember it wrong. They need to have the law. And the law here is the law of Moses. And I also knew that the law was engraven upon the plates of brass. And again, I knew that the Lord had delivered Laban into my hands for this cause, that I might obtain the records according to his commandments. Another thing here, he says we need these to keep the commandments, to keep the law. It is interesting to me that nowhere in the Book of Mormon do we see Jewish practices or laws or understandings ever happening. Instead, we see a 19th century Protestant Christianity being practiced, which has nothing to do with the law that they're preserving. So if they're going to be practicing 19th century Protestant Christianity, that's what it's most closely is in the Book of Mormon. Why would they need the law of Moses, which is pre understanding of this new and higher law? Like the idea that this people are practicing something so far ahead. It's like you don't even when you get the law, you don't even need it. You're not even obeying that law. You're living a different religion than the Jews are at the time. They're living Christianity way before the Jews are, way before Christ comes. So this is also problematic in that sense. And I also knew that the law was going to be oppressed. And again, I knew that the Lord had delivered Laban into my hands for this cause, that I might obtain the records according to his commandments. Once again, do you need to kill Laban? He's so drunk, he's passed out on the ground. Can you not just take his clothes off him? Can you not just take his sword off him? Why do you need to decapitate him? That's another thing. That's a gruesome thing. Think of all the blood that's going to get everywhere when you decapitate someone, all over his clothes. And he takes the clothes off after he decapitates him. All the blood everywhere. That's a gruesome way to kill someone. You could just stab his heart. Quick and easy. Get it done. You have to decapitate him. Decapitation is, if you're using a sword, it's not like an executioner. It's a sawing motion, and it's a slow and painful. It's not this quick thing. So it's not even a very merciful way to kill Laban. Then again, he's so drunk, maybe he doesn't feel it. Although I think you'd feel it, even if you were that drunk. You'd probably wake up. Okay, so this also I don't understand. That I might obtain the records according to his commandments, his commandment being that I kill Laban. Therefore I did obey the voice of the Spirit, and took Laban by the hair of the head, and I smote off his head with his own sword. And after I'd smitten off his head, I took the garments of Laban and put them upon mine own body, covered in his blood, yea, even every whit, and I did gird on his armor about my loins. So another thing here, once again, there would be blood all over everything, but also Nephi would absolutely be considered an apostate in today's church. We teach in today's church that if the Spirit tells you to do something, that, and it's contrary to the commandments, that it's not the Spirit. So there's a religious structure here. There are elders of the church, and Nephi's going against the systematic organization, the elders of the church, claiming spiritual revelation, that he has to then violate significant commandments because the Spirit told him. We're taught that the Spirit will never tell you to do something that contradicts the commandments, even though that flies in the face of almost every Old Testament story and in the story of Nephi here, because the Spirit's clearly telling them to kill him, or in the case of Abraham and Isaac, sacrifice your son, and lie to Isaac, by the way. Abraham just lies to Isaac. Once again, Abraham he doesn't murder him, but he is a liar, and he had murderous intent, attempted murder charge placed against him. So that's another problem here. We definitely believe in a top-down system, and Nephi's not even considered a prophet here. So his personal revelation is directly going against commandments and prophetic counsel at the time. Continuing on. And it's unnecessary. I'll point that out. And after I'd smitten off his head with his own sword, okay, we did that. And after I had done this, I went forth unto the treasury of Laban. And as I went forth towards the treasury of Laban, behold, I saw the servant of Laban, supposedly the most elite, who had the keys of the treasury. And I commanded him in the voice of Laban, let's just assume that God changes Nephi's voice, that he should go with me into the treasury. And he supposed me to be his master, not because I looked like Laban, but because he saw my clothing and the sword. So it's not like God's changing the appearance of Nephi here. It's literally, Zoram has no idea what Laban looks like. He just sees like the clothes and the sword and assumes. So I don't think they interact as closely as that paper would have you believe. Also, hold on. I got to, just timing-wise, I just got to make sure. Let me check one thing real quick. Okay, sorry for that little cut there. We're going to keep going. And he's speaking to me concerning the elders of the Jews. The elders. Elders, the religious people here. He, knowing that his master Laban had been out by night among them. And I spake unto him as if it had been Laban. And I also spake unto him that I should carry the engravings which were upon the plates of brass to my elder brethren, who were without the walls. He used the term elder here to confuse Zoram. And also bade him that he should follow me. And he supposing that I spoke of the brethren of the church, elder brethren, that I was truly that Laban whom I had slain, wherefore he did follow me. So this is him lying. He lies here. And he knows it. He says, oh, I know that he... That's another thing. We consider it a lie. If someone misunderstands me and I don't correct them, that's considered a lie. We consider that a lie in our church. And he's spoken to me many times concerning the elders of the Jews. He's sitting here talking to me. He's like, whoa, I've never seen you, dude. I'm going to keep talking to you. Yeah, man. How is it talking to these religious people? As I went forth unto my brethren who were without the walls. Also strange, he's like, yeah, we're just hanging outside the walls of the city. You should come with us. And Zoram just is like, yeah, okay. And it came to pass that when Laman saw me, he was exceedingly frightened, and also Lemuel and Sam. And they fled from before my presence, for they supposed it was Laban, and that he had slain me, and had sought to take away their lives also. And it came to pass that I called after them, and they did hear me, wherefore they did cease to flee from my presence. So they know it's Nephi's voice. And it came to pass that when the servant of Laban beheld my brethren, not the change in voice, so we can actually assume God didn't change his voice, so we can assume that Zoram didn't really have a relationship with Laban. He began to tremble, and was about to flee from before me and return to the city of Jerusalem. So one of the most faithful, loyal, trusted, high-ranking people underneath Laban, guarding the treasury, elite warrior, trembles because he sees a couple random people running away from what he supposes is Laban. And now I, Nephi, being a man large in stature, and also having received much strength of the Lord, therefore I did seize upon the servant of Laban, and held him that he should not flee, straining credulity. And it came to pass that I spake with him, that if he would hearken unto my words, as the Lord liveth and as I live, even so that if he would hearken unto our words, we would spare his life. So this is a threat. Hey, if you listen to me, I won't kill you. So Nephi has killed Laban, lied to Zoram, roped Zoram into this. He didn't even have to rope Zoram into it. He literally could have just gotten the plates and said, hey, Zoram, you stay here. No, he brings Zoram with. Then when Zoram gets there, Nephi's just going to threaten him. Hey, we're going to kill you unless you come with us. And I spake unto him even with an oath that he need not fear, that he should be a free man like unto us if he would go down in the wilderness with us. So is he not a free man before? It seems like he was in a pretty good position, being right underneath Laban, guarding the treasury, elite warrior. And I also spake unto him, saying, surely the Lord hath commanded us to do this thing. Surely God told me to do this. Surely God told me to kill Laban, lie to you, steal the plates, and then threaten you, and threaten to kill you. Surely that comes of God. This is delusional behavior. And then he's like, should we not be diligent in keeping the commandments of the Lord? Clearly God told me to do all those things, even though actually in the text itself, the only thing God ever said was to kill Laban. God never instructed Nephi to lie. He never instructed Nephi to even put on the things of Laban, the clothes of Laban. Nephi just does those things. You could argue that he was led by the Spirit, not knowing beforehand what he should do, but the only direct commandment we ever hear from God is to kill Laban, and it's justified with something that is not really justifiable. Continuing on. And I also spake unto him, saying, surely, okay, he's commanded us to do this thing, therefore, okay, we already did that. Or did I? No, I didn't. This is literally just a repeat. And I also spake unto him, saying, surely the Lord hath commanded us to do this thing, and shall we not be diligent in keeping the commandments of the Lord? Or no, did I already read this? I think I already read this. That's my bad. And it came to pass that Zoram did take courage at the words which I spake. After he took courage when I threatened to kill him. Now Zoram was the name of the servant, and he promised that he would go down into the... And servant, they're acting like servant means like a slave here almost, which is why I assume it says free man. And yet the arguments from Nibley is because of the station of Zoram and of Laban. Zoram most certainly is not this slave servant. He's a higher up, trusted by Laban. It's not like he's a servant, but it's not like it's not this idea of he's a slave. He's living a good life. Now Zoram was the name of the servant, and he promised that he would go down into the wilderness unto our father. Yea, and he also made an oath unto us that he would tarry with us from that time forth. Now we were desirous that you should tarry for us for this cause, that the Jews might not know concerning our flight into the wilderness, lest they should pursue us and destroy us. So once again, Nephi is justifying his poor behavior with something that does not make sense when we think about it critically. I did this because I don't want them to know that we left. Now here's the problem. The servants that tried to kill Nephi and his brethren initially are going to see and hear about Laban being dead the next day. They're going to be called into question because they're the people who are supposed to be around him, protecting him, serving him, and so are the elders. And we're going to sit here and pretend they're not going to be like, oh yeah, guess what? yesterday and then the day before that, these people were trying to get the plates, and whoa, Zoram's gone and the plates are gone, but nothing else in the treasury's gone? Weird. Who could that be? Preliminary investigations. We're an hour into it. I already know all of this. Zoram's gone. The plates are gone. Laban's decapitated. Immediately, everyone's going to think that just taking Zoram doesn't solve your problem, as it seems to, as the Book of Mormon wants you to think here. And this, once again, just goes to show how this story, this narrative, they're not well thought out. And when we try and make it seem like it's well thought out, when we have Hugh Nibley coming in here and trying to make it seem like, 50 is such a significant number, and he's totally authentic. Even when we hold up the quote-unquote authenticness of Laban and of this whole story, it doesn't add up. There's no way it adds up. Even the authenticity parts of it, even these extra parts that we spent so long reading into, don't match the narrative. And it came to pass when Zoram had made an oath unto us, our fears did cease concerning him. Oh yeah, so I don't think I finished my point here. There's no way that the Jews wouldn't immediately think of Lehi. And then they go and he's not in his house. When they go and investigate, oh, they're gone. Where would they have gone? They're going to look all over, and then they're going to be like, oh, looks like... I just the idea that they wouldn't seek this out is ridiculous. And then it's like, well... And that's another thing. He also doesn't have to... He can just take the plates from Zoram and leave. Zoram actually doesn't need to be part of this at all. So this is also just strange that that this is another justification for it. Zoram really didn't have to be included. Nephi didn't have to lie. Nephi didn't even have to kill Laban. Like, Laban could have just woken up naked. I'm like, whoa, last night was freaking wild. Like, he was drunk. I'm sure he's woken up naked in the street sometimes before. Why can't he just wake up naked? Jerusalem's going to be destroyed anyways, so there's no justification for destroying Laban because he's going to, somehow make them be destroyed faster. And then to my anthropologist friend's argument here, they say that Zoram, this is the reason, taking Zoram is the reason why the Jews would know about the flight, not killing Laban. So that apologetic that he was forced into a corner with also doesn't hold up according to the text. And it came to pass that we took the place of brass and the servant of Laban and departed into the wilderness and journeyed into the tent of our father. Okay, so I just want to highlight here what the Spirit told Nephi to do. First off, this is Nephi writing the record. He can say whatever he wants. But the Spirit is telling him to go against the hierarchical church at the time. Nephi's not a prophet. He holds no prominent position in the church. He's not called of God. He's told by Lehi to go do something, so I guess you could argue Lehi's a prophet, and Lehi commands him. So God tells him to kill Laban for no reason, because he doesn't have to, and it only makes it look bad. Here's the thing. If we don't kill Laban, he just wakes up naked, how are they even going to know? It's not like Laban... We're sitting here saying Laban doesn't obey the commandments. He's out partying with the elders. Zoram is shocked. He doesn't even recognize Nephi versus Laban. It's not like Laban visits the treasury. It's not like it's his treasury. He's just in charge of guarding it. So there's so many things lined up here. It's like, and you really think that he's going to be reading the scriptures? Laban doesn't care. He's painted as this bad guy. He's not going to spend any time reading the scriptures, and neither are the elders. They're out partying and getting drunk. Also, the idea that there would only be this one record is ridiculous, because we literally have other records written on papyrus at the time. How do you think we have the books of Moses at the time? It's not like this is the only record in the city. So like the idea that this goes missing too is just also like he would even notice, or by the time he notices, like legitimately, when is he going to notice? It's way more likely that they go a longer time without being noticed as missing. I don't know. I'm just sitting here like, how does any of this story actually add up? Now, continuing on, just a couple other things. We're wrapping it up here. 54 minutes, dang. God knows before giving this justification. This is 1 Nephi 3, so this is chapter 3, not chapter 4, which is where God says we have to kill Laban because it's better that Laban dies rather than a whole nation dwindle and perish in unbelief. God already, before giving that justification, knew that Jerusalem must be destroyed. So he already knows, so there's no reason to kill Laban. There's none. Also down here, And it came to pass that after this man, we may preserve unto them the words which have been spoken by the mouth of all the holy prophets, which have been delivered unto them by the Spirit and power of God. And also, where's the one where it says this up here? And behold, it is wisdom in God that we should obtain these records, that we may preserve unto our children the language of our fathers. So the language here would be Reformed Egyptian, not Hebrew, because that's what the plates are. They're in Reformed Egyptian. So that's another problem. Because, once again, I've already said that it's a problem that the prophets at the time would have had their things translated into a language that we have no evidence for, Reformed Egyptian. And why would they even be speaking Reformed Egyptian at that time? And it's so hard to carve that into these metal records. Like, if anything, a translation made at the time would most likely be on papyrus because of the time that they would have had to do it in, and because the amount of space you need and the largeness of those records would have been crazy. But there's another reason why he says we need the records, so that you guys can have the law, and so that we can preserve this language. Even though the language does not get preserved, we don't have the language. So, continuing on. Lastly, regarding God not wanting this justification here of we have to kill Laban so that they don't dwindle and perish, God literally builds in right here in 1 Nephi 2 regarding Laban and Lemuel. For behold, in that day that this is talking about the seed of Nephi, that they shall rebel against me, I will curse them even with a sore curse, that they shall have no power over thy seed. Or no, this is regarding Laman and Lemuel's posterity. So they will be cursed sorely. They shall have no power over thy seed, Nephi, except they shall rebel against me also. So unless your seed rebels against me, you don't got to worry about it. And if it so be that they rebel against me, they shall be a scourge unto thy seed to stir them up in the ways of remembrance, or in the ways of utter destruction. At the end of the Book of Mormon narrative, God literally builds in a way for this nation to dwindle and perish. He is the direct cause of their perishing. The idea that it is better for one man to perish, why wouldn't it be better for Laman and Lemuel to perish? Do you know how many wars would be stopped? Do you know how many priestcrafts would have been stopped? God literally, he says, I'm killing Laban to prevent this, but then he literally leaves in that same edge case scenario with Laban and Lemuel. So that's, long story short, that's why I believe Nephi is a liar and a murderer by the own text of the Book of Mormon, if it is a historical narrative. There's no need for him to have killed anyone. It is actually only worse off. And the last thing I'll say here is they leave with the plates, and then Lehi goes, oops, we need women. Go back. So the idea that when they come back, there's nothing in the narrative mentioning how they have to be sneaky, they have to look out for these elite warriors, this investigation. And he goes to Ishmael and Ishmael's family. You're acting like the whole city wouldn't have been questioned and interrogated. Like Ishmael knew who Lehi and his family was. It's in the narrative. To think that they wouldn't go and question all the people who knew Lehi, like the second Ishmael sees Nephi and his brethren, he's going to know, oh my gosh, this dude murdered Laban and stole from Laban, and he's wanted. Not mentioned in the narrative at all, not even a problem. They don't even care, and that absolutely would have been part of the narrative. So I think just a careful, critical study of the text goes for me to show that this story didn't happen. There's so much that's left out of it. It's not well thought through. God contradicts himself with his justifications, and the justifications are weak. And then when we actually try to use Hugh Nibley to apply all these different apologetics and see who Laban really is, it still falls apart, and it actually makes things worse. If we're just going off the narrative, it's bad. If we think about what everything else really means about who Laban is and how high up he really is, it gets even worse. So apologetics only make the case stronger to show that Nephi was not justified here. I will say one last thing. This was first brought to my attention on my mission. I was teaching an investigator, and she had been part of an offshoot of Mormonism that practiced polygamy. I believe they were called the Lamb of God, or the Blood of the Lamb. And she said that her father, she'd escaped, she'd left. She said that her father received revelations to kill people. And she said that she believed the Book of Mormon as a historical narrative, but she didn't believe it spiritually. And she told me, she says, I don't think Nephi was a good person because I don't believe the Spirit would ever tell you to kill someone. Because she had had a personal experience with her father killing people who disagreed with him and who were dissenters, and saying that the Spirit told him to do it. And so she really struggled with this story of Nephi and this idea that, yeah, like Nephi is receiving these revelations and it doesn't seem justified. And I remember at first I was like, dang. I was like, no, but like I tried to read out the justifications for God, but then in my own study, because she didn't accept my apologetics at the time, and rightfully so, the more I looked into it, I mean, as a believing member, I was convinced that Nephi was not a good guy. I was convinced that he absolutely lied for no reason. He didn't need to kill Laban, and he's writing this record so he can write in whatever he wants. He can literally write in that the Spirit told him, and the Spirit couldn't have told him. Like, he's writing this record by his own hand. He can just be lying the whole time. He's already admitted to lying, which then makes an interesting idea that if Nephi is lying here, and it shows his character, he's so willing to lie and kill, wouldn't the hate from Laman and Lemuel be justified? Wouldn't they be suspicious of wanting to follow Nephi? They're very overzealous, highly dogmatic, insane younger brother. So, interesting to think about. Anyways, that's it. I did not think this would be an hour-long video, but here we are. That is why I think Nephi is a liar and a murderer. Thank you, everyone, for watching. If you like this, I do really like breaking down and critically reading different narratives in the Book of Mormon. I really like... It's fun to engage with the text critically and ask questions like this. I love it, which is why I actually like talking to believers like my anthropologist friend, because I like getting into this. Let's assume this did happen. What does that actually mean? Another really cool one that if you're interested in, you can look into everything it takes to build a boat. And there's a really good video done by Mormonism Live about Nephi building a boat. Could Nephi have built a boat? And how that story strains credulity as well, because there's way more involved in making a boat than Joseph really accounted for at the time he was writing the Book of Mormon. So that's it, everyone. Thank you for watching. Have a great rest of your Sunday. I'll see you in another video.